Looking back on the biggest tech stories on our radar this week, the next story may go down as one of the biggest of the year. On Thursday, Yahoo disclosed that 500 million of its users were affected in the biggest known security breach of all time. For reference, that is more than twice the size of LinkedIn's hack in 2012 and 100 million accounts bigger than what used to be considered the biggest hack of all time, MySpace. Today, we learned that Yahoo was first tipped off of a possible breach sometime in July when a hacker advertised 280 million user credentials for sale on the black market. On July 25th, Verizon agreed to buy the core business for $4.8 billion. Fast forward 2 months to this week, when Yahoo found enough evidence of a much larger and more serious hack that it had to tell Verizon. On Thursday, it shared the news with the world. Now Yahoo's drawn a negligence lawsuit by one user seeking class action status. So is the deal in jeopardy? Most analysts seem to think no. And LionTree CEO Aryeh Bourkoff, who helped advise Verizon on the deal, sounded unworried.
Knowing Verizon, they are assessing the situation and trying to determine the right financial remedies, if any. But obviously, everyone's looking forward to closing the deal and integrating it with AOL and the other Verizon assets. And clearly, this has been a bit of a hurdle and a bump in the road.
Still with us to discuss Techonomy CEO David Kirkpatrick in New York, and here in the studio, Google's former click fraud czar, now CTO of Shape Security, Shuman Ghosh-Majumdar. So first of all, does Verizon have something to worry about here, Shuman?
Well, I think that one of the things that's remarkable about the announcement of all of this information over the course of the last few days has been that Verizon stated that they only found out about this situation 2 days earlier to Yahoo making it public. So I think that they're still in the stage where they need to be able to assess exactly what's the impact to them, how much work is going to be required to be able to remediate it, and so on.
David, are we getting ahead of ourselves here? Is this something that could make a deal fall apart or unlikely?
Oh, I think it's possible. I just don't think we know enough, and neither does Verizon, as Shuman points out. One thing, though, that's interesting for me as a Yahoo user, and your colleagues sometimes make fun of me for using a Yahoo account still, just because I've used it for so long and you get it so integrated with your life, it's hard to move off it. I've just thought about in the last couple days how many times in the last 2 years they have forced me to change my password. Almost every time I travel outside the United States, one way or another, they end up making me change my password, which suggests their security has been fairly decent since this occurred, whether they knew it occurred or not.
Shuman, is that a sign of a good security system?
It actually is a sign of some real diligence that they're putting into looking at whether or not accounts have been taken over. And one of the things that many people don't realize is that any of the world's largest websites is under large-scale continuous attack.
So let's talk about this, because when you sat down in the commercial break, I said, I don't understand. Why doesn't Amazon ever get hacked? They have, a lot of really valuable information. You said, oh, they do. We just don't know about it. So what's really happening behind the scenes?
So basically, if you're running a large website and you've got the capability for anyone to come in and log in to that website, then there are cyber criminals that are using very sophisticated automated software to constantly test usernames and passwords that they've stolen from completely unrelated sites in order to discover whether or not those same passwords are valid on that particular site. So this isn't an activity that users are able to necessarily see on a regular basis, but the companies themselves do see it.
So if the companies are getting hacked and not telling us, should they be?
So I think that...
Don't they have an obligation to tell customers when their information has been stolen?
I think that there's a difference between a very large-scale singular incident, like a state-sponsored actor potentially infiltrating your systems, versus the type of fraud that companies experience on essentially a daily basis, where you've got users that are having their accounts taken over by folks that shouldn't have access to them. And because of the fact that that sort of fraud happens on a regular basis, they don't even necessarily think of it as a security incident. In a lot of cases, they think of it as a fraud issue. And of course, every company, every retailer in the world experiences fraud on a daily basis. But I think that what's going on here is that people are now asking themselves, what do I do about this incident? And the answer is there isn't actually a whole lot for them to do. Yahoo has notified all of the folks that have been potentially affected by this to the best of their ability to be able to determine. And now all of those folks just need to change their passwords. And then there's nothing else they really need to do on Yahoo. Yahoo.
So given the distinction you made between fraud and a state-sponsored hack, how serious do you think this particular hack is?
Well, it's very serious from the point of view of the scale of it. So as the graphic was showing, it's the largest set of accounts that have been taken from one particular system as far as we know. And I think that that alone means that any attacker that has access to those is now going to have a much greater success rate in being able to infiltrate a system like Amazon, like any major retailer or any airline, and so on.
Now, David, you mentioned that you still have a Yahoo account. What did Yahoo prompt you to do in this particular instance? And what do you make of the comments here that this is happening to a lot of different companies and a lot of different users who use these different products and services all the time, and we don't even know it?
Well, I think the key point is what Schumann explained before, that what they do with this data is put it into automated assaults that are ongoing and relentless, and where they test millions, I'm sure in many cases, of combinations of usernames and passwords. And unfortunately, the people of the 500 million who were hacked in Yahoo who use the same password on other websites are the ones who are most likely to really be hurt as a result. I don't do that, and I actually have calculated roughly that my password and email have been stolen 7 times, my credit card information twice, and my name and birth date at least 4 times, based on all the different services that I use that have been hacked at one time or another, banks, retailers. It's really unfortunate, but this is just a reality. You got to change your stuff all the time. So, but I think the state-sponsored issue is super interesting if we have time to discuss that.
Quickly, Schumann, let's talk about that, because we had a couple of guests on yesterday who indicated that saying an attack is state-sponsored is a good excuse for any company to use because it makes it sound like it's less their fault. Obviously, we don't know exactly what happened here, but Yahoo says it does believe this attack was state-sponsored. Does that ring true to you?
One of the real difficulties when it comes to figuring out what happened with any breach is attribution. So within the security industry, trying to figure out who was behind an attack, what their intent was, and so on. And in a lot of cases, you're just left guessing. So who knows whether or not this actually was a state-sponsored actor? But one of the weird things about it is the fact that the credentials then went up for sale afterwards. So state-sponsored actors generally don't need the money. It's possible that they already got the value that they needed out of it, and then they might as well monetize it, or someone else got access to it. But generally what you see from state-sponsored actions is that there isn't as much of a direct commercial incentive.